Good afternoon, everybody. It's Lorraine Alternative Homesteading on January 13, 2026. I hope everybody's doing well. Remember to hit the notifications bell. Thank you, subscribers. Welcome to my channel. So this is going to be an interesting topic, and I'm going to make an argument that the terrorist watch list, the watch lists, watchlisting, blacklisting people, is a form of human trafficking. So, what does human trafficking look like? And I'm going to tell you, this is really interesting because I've got, publicly available documents that I'm referring to. But I also asked Grok last night, and Grok had the audacity to literally write a response that said, no response. But ChatGPT provided a response. So I asked ChatGPT and Grok exactly the same question. What does human trafficking really look like? Who is involved? How can it be prevented or stopped or exposed? So again, I'm going to make the argument that human trafficking, not only the terms, definitions of human trafficking need to be expanded to encompass other areas of trafficking, but also that the watchlisting people, blacklisting people, is a form of human trafficking. So what is human trafficking? Human trafficking is the exploitation of people for profit through force, fraud, or coercion. It can involve labor or sexual exploitation and occurs in cities, suburbs, and rural areas. It's a crime of control. Just like narcissistic control, narcissistic abuse. It's not a coincidence. It's not symbolism. It is a crime of control. Trafficking operations are usually, they're small, hidden, and financially motivated. They're hidden and financially motivated. And for most of the targeted people that I've been in contact with, the perpetrators against all of us, particularly those that own a home or real estate, there is a huge financial motivation. There's a huge financial motivation in depreciating somebody's property value and then send somebody in that really wants it and offer you a low ball to kick you off your property while they're assuming all the financial gains for your property. Like when I lived at 52 Sutton Drive, Manalapan, New Jersey, a home I lived in for 30 years as original owner, and I invested my heart and soul in that house. Literally, it had the prettiest garden of anybody on the block, according to most of the landscapers, and they ended up destroying a lot of it. But that house now that I lived in, that sold for $550 when it was worth back then $620, along with the security system that I installed and the flat TV, flat wall screen TV, and all the other items that were left behind that I couldn't take with me, that were sold along with the property, including new windows and new screens and new plumbing and newly renovated bathrooms, etc., is now going for close to $1 million. Yeah, in 6 short years, $1 million. So all of that heart and soul, all of those 30 years of investing into that house, only sold for $550 when back then it was worth $620, and they prevented me from selling for 3 years. And that's what's happening here in Jackson County, Kentucky, and it is a form of human trafficking. When people exploit and profit at the expense, regardless of a force, fraud, or coercion. Now, most of the The legal terminology for human trafficking involves sexual and forced labor. But I'm going to include real estate property mobbing because there are a lot of areas of trafficking that are very overlooked. So then there's the state-sponsored governments can also act as human traffickers. And the way they do that is through enacting government policies or patterns of abuse through government-funded programs. And that is reminiscent of the COPS program, Citizens on Patrol. Because the citizens on patrol are literally not preventing crime. They're literally creating crime and committing crimes against targeted people that are on a watch list. So the fact that somebody's on a watch list is a form of human trafficking because allegedly their rights are taken away from them. They really can't move around freely. They're being exploited through profit and force and coercion, covert experimentation. Who's profiting from that? Scientists, DARPA, the FBI, the CIA, the NSA, all the research scientists and universities, the medical industrial complex, profiting off of covertly experimenting on people placed on a list, and they're not terrorists. The terrorist watch list is a fraud system of exploitation of people for profit through force, coercion, covert harassment, covert experimentation, and yes, sexual exploitation, because through these watch-listed programs, your neighbors, the fusion center operatives, and we'll get to those creatures soon enough, are spreading slander and lie in communities, the cities, the suburbs, and rural areas. It's a crime of coercion and control. Now, according to Chat, the trafficking operations are usually small and hidden and financially motivated, but I will make the argument that because the cities and states are involved and because these programs are federally funded, they're not small. They're not small operations. These are huge octopus arms of financially motivated crimes. So what are the common elements of human trafficking? Someone cannot freely leave. They cannot freely leave their employment or housing, like through blacklisting, right? If you're blacklisting, you're mobbed at your place of employment, but you need to work. You need to work there. You need to pay your bills. They will set it up so that you can't leave. Or they'll set it up to force you out and not be able to obtain another form of employment. And that is an element of human trafficking. Controlling where somebody lives if they can or cannot sell their place of residence, and whether or not they can obtain employment. Or how about a veterinarian? Like controlling the fact that Dr. Rebecca Caleb Wilson won't give me a veterinary appointment because caught on film, on camera, on video, recorded, I'm not friends with her friends, and she doesn't get me. So somebody went behind my back and contacted the veterinarian as they're dumping pregnant cats on my property. Another method of control, another financially motivated scheme here in Jackson County, Kentucky. because they're trying to depreciate the value of the property by chopping down trees, burning them from the inside out, neighbors trespassing back and forth, approaching my workers to not work here, and or, well, could you do a little damage for us and we'll pay you on the side? Or how about financially motivated through the Jackson County PVA Bobby Edwards, increasing my property taxes by close to $1,500 as a senior citizen. Nobody else around here received an increase. I spoke to somebody that's got a 3,600 square foot house and got a decrease in property taxes. But no, this is financially motivated. It's a form of asset stripping, where another person controls the money. They control the identification or the movement of the individual, like stealing, identifying information, stealing my master's degree, my framed master's degree, stealing my ordained ministry certification, my Reiki master teacher certification, stealing those forms of identification, including New Jersey license plates, my passport. How about the use of threats, debt manipulation, or isolation? Like isolation for targeted people is the slander campaign spread by Fusion Center human trafficking agents. Yeah, we're going to call them what they really are. The Fusion Center operatives, the Fusion Center agents, they're engaged in human trafficking. They use threats, debt manipulation, or isolation. They approach your neighbors. Tell them that you are a threat, to keep an eye on you. You, the innocent one. Oh, we'll pay you on the side. We'll give you a little gift card. Could you just watch that person and let them know when they leave the house? Or could you just photograph them? Or make sure that if they have any visitors, you get a copy of their license plate. The victims appear, they're monitored. The victims are coached. The victims may be fearful around a specific individual. The profits are quietly collected through cash, prepaid cards, or third-party accounts. Like demonetizing my YouTube channel just before it's going to increase exponentially in views. And that's exactly what happens. My views went from, 60, 70, 100, a couple hundred, to now thousands of views. My earnings would have been a couple of $1,000s a month at this point. And that was manipulated. And the trafficking, they avoid attention. They hide in the shadows. They don't want anybody to know who they are. So they're the ones that drive down the county road, for instance, or around your neighborhood with the black windows. Not tinted windows, the black windows that you cannot see in at all. And those vehicles are $40, $50, $60, $100,000 new vehicles. And they'll frequently change the license plate numbers, or the license plate numbers will reflect something that is similar to, let's say, the 732 area code in New Jersey. They'll have that on a license plate here of a perpetrator that's involved in surveilling and stalking me for profit. So the profits are quietly collected through cash, prepaid cards, or third-party accounts, or they steal your new Swatch watch from inside your house. My $90 Swatch watch. Right? Or they'll come in and steal any number of things. Like last year here in Jackson County, Kentucky, I sent the sheriff a list of all the items that were stolen from inside my house that totaled over $7,000. So the profits are quietly collected. And in this form of trafficking, it avoids attention, because it does not rely on public display or outward intimidation. So, what are the common roles in a trafficking operation? So, one person may actually fulfill multiple roles, and that would certainly be the case in very small communities. And that's what happens here. It's like you've got a key role, a bunch of players, and they switch them up in the county roles here. Well, I'll give you for instance. So, when I moved here to Jackson County, Kentucky, we had a sheriff, Paul Hayes. He ended up retiring. But I can't say he did retire. He just retired as a sheriff. Because control freaks, like sheriffs, they never retire. They never go home and hang out with their wives or their puppies or their chickens. No. So this sheriff then decides he's going to go work at the local high school, like as security or whatever. That ended, and guess what? Lo and behold, after Judgy Pudgy Gabbard leaves office to go back to his fake ministry, guess who might be taking his place? The former sheriff, Paul Hayes, in charge of road department. What the hell does a sheriff know about repairing county roads and creeks? Inquiring minds like to know. Please leave a comment down below. Leave a comment down below. So now some of the indicators that are not considered human trafficking. Online harassment is really not a form of human trafficking. It is a form of cyber stalking and harassment. Symbolic markings, graffiti, and stuff like that. That's a form of vandalism associated with property mobbing and harassment. Now, neighbors and communities that act in secret coordination may or may not know that they're involved in a human trafficking operation. They're being used and manipulated, told a bunch of lies by the Fusion Center human trafficking agents to get them to participate, to get them to be involved in hate crimes for profit. And of course, small minds believe this bull crap. So it's really important to not mislabel some unrelated behaviors like cyber stalking as involved in trafficking. So now, what are the red flags of a potential victim? You need to look for the patterns, not a single event. And patterns are important. Patterns in forensics, criminology, are incredibly important. It doesn't mean that you saw something once and it's like, oh, no, it is a pattern. It's a systemic pattern. When there are restricted communications or movement, like the interception of the keyboard, both on my laptop, on my iPhone, the interception of people wanting to contact me on the sale of my property, the interception of all of my emails going out to the YouTube creator attorneys, the YouTube creator real estate agents, the Institute for Justice, interception of my mail to the Attorney General, interceptions of my mail to the Department of Justice. This is a form of human trafficking. Restricting communications or movement, intercepting to prevent your contacting someone that you need to speak to, redirecting your phone calls. What about the lack of access to your personal documents or your money? For instance, little Bobby Edwards here, the Jackson County PVA, through FOIA requests, refused to provide me a copy of the letter he allegedly claims he sent back in June that my property taxes would be increased. And without that document, I had no method of one in knowing that my property taxes would increase. I didn't find that out until October. Or the ability to dispute it. So even the Kentucky Department of Revenue is not getting back to me on this crime. This is a form of human trafficking. So the watch list, the blacklist, I will argue, is a systemic federal city-state form of human trafficking. Most victims do not identify while they're under control. They're systemically abused through trauma-based mind control, satanic ritual abuse, property theft, pet harming, pulsed microwave radiation, manipulating your central nervous system, but let's talk about how some of these cases can be uncovered, which is why I'm making this video. Victims escape, or they disclose what's going on. There can be financial investigations, routine inspections or traffic stops, online ad monitoring, reports from medical staff or educators, the non-corruptible ones that will report what's happening to your body. Now, private citizens are not expected to investigate these trafficking networks. How do you prevent this stuff? And I'm going to go back and forth because this is just an outline that I'm going through here. And then we're going to go dive a little deeper in here. You need to accurately educate the public on what is human trafficking. It is not just sex and forced labor. It encompasses so much more. You need to report very specific and observable exploitation. And you need to support other survivors and the bona fide survivor services. Reduce your isolation and vulnerability, which is very difficult as a targeted person because you're watch listed and blacklisted. You're blacklisted, which is a form of human trafficking. So now, I'm going to the National Library of Medicine. This is a PubMed Central National, the NIH. Now, this is human trafficking of older adults and adults with disabilities. And I know many of you targeted people have brothers and or sisters that are disabled. There's an emerging type of trafficking. It's targeting overlooked at-risk adults. Benefits trafficking, meaning your Social Security benefits, meaning your veteran benefits, meaning insurance benefits. This is an emerging type of human trafficking. And let me just get the date of this. This is January 22nd, 2024 by Anna Thomas and Heather Strickland. Benefits tracking. Human trafficking of older adults and adults with disabilities. And this is the abstract. An emerging type of trafficking is targeting overlooked at-risk adults. Benefits trafficking is the systemic recruitment, harboring, neglect, and financial exploitation of elder and disabled adults who receive government benefits such as Social Security, veterans benefits, Medicaid, and Medicare. And I will attest to the fact that when I lived at 52 Sutton Drive in Manalapan, New Jersey, a home I lived in for 30 years as the original owner, and when the F'ers at the Manalapan, New Jersey Police Department decided to drag me over to the Centra-State emergency room to drug test me because I reported a crime, and they killed my cat with directed energy weapons in the early morning hours. They had the audacity to attempt to contact Medicare and bill them for that fiasco. Of course, it was denied. And then, of course, they wanted to charge me over $3,000. I didn't pay a dime of it. I have not paid a dime of it. I say return to sender. Address is known. The Manalapan, New Jersey Police Department. They rake in millions of dollars in asset stripping Manalapan, New Jersey residents who pay some of the highest property taxes in the country just to live there. So yes, and this happens to a lot of people that are either Baker acted, forced into the hospital. If you have Medicare, Medicaid, if you have medical insurance, like they did with my mother. My mother had one of the best medical insurance plans in the state of New York. And they made sure that when they were killing her off, to charge every last little bit to her insurance company. How do I know? I called them and I said, please do not pay this claim. I gave them all the reasons why it was fraudulent. And they kept telling me, oh, you don't have to worry about it. We're not going to bill you anything. We just took that $47,000 from the insurance. And who knows what else? Who knows what else? I found out something, and this I'm going to a little sidestep here. You know what I found out? This is what I found out. Remember Karen Romero, the nurse, who she encountered 3 car accidents in a year, and she was literally pushed as she's recovering with a directed energy weapon or a cloaked person in her apartment that sent her back to the hospital. And then they were drugging her into submission, and then she just suddenly she dies. Well, guess what I found out? Guess what else they took from her? Beware of the organ traffickers, boys and girls, men and women. They stole her heart. I wonder what kind of payoff that was. What kind of a payoff was that? That is another form of human trafficking. To take a healthy person, medicate them into submission, right? And then kill them off. Steal what's inside. But no, this is not being discussed here at the U.S. Department of State website and this medical publication. Oh yeah, we'll get to this U.S. Department of State website at what they consider to be human trafficking, which needs to be expanded. So this area of human trafficking is unresearched, and its prevalence is largely unknown outside of the few entities working in this space. So this paper focuses mainly on raising awareness of benefits, trafficking, and suggestions for future funding and research initiatives. Well, of course, that's what these communities do here. They need grant funding so they could research something that we already know. So, who are these at-risk adults, vulnerable adults? They're terms used to collectively refer to older adults and disabled adults. Each state defines the age of an elder differently, and some states do not have a disabled adult in their protected class. So I'll give you, for instance, the official code of Georgia, section 16.5.100 defines an elder as a person 65 years of age or older, and a disabled adult as a person over 18 years old who has an incapacitation that is physical or mental, such as dementia, Alzheimer, etc. Now, according to the U.S. Census Bureau, by 2060, nearly 1 in 4 Americans is projected to be an older adult, marking the general population as being 23%. The Administration for Community Living noted that in 2020, 16% of the U.S. population, or 1 in every 7 Americans, is 65 or older. And Georgia has over 1 million people 65 plus older, making that age group 15% of their state's population. And in the last 10 years, between 2010 and 2020, Georgia has seen a 50% increase in people aged 65 plus. And right here in Jackson County, Kentucky, you are entitled to the homesteader's rebate, 65 and older, where your property taxes are supposed to be allegedly exonerated. And my property taxes were exonerated for 2 years, and they should have been in 2025. But little Bobby Edwards, the Jackson County PVA, he decided, without contacting me, without visiting my property, without asking whether or not I've torn any buildings down, whether or not there's been any vandalism, he decided he's going to increase my property taxes on my 740 square foot cabin home. When I have a neighbor with a 3,600 square foot house on 20 plus acres, got a decrease in property taxes. Oh, and by the way, I located a house that's selling now on the market, over 100 acres, over 3,000 square feet, and they're paying less than $800 for their property taxes. But not Lorraine. Where do you think that was? Exploitation for profit here in Jackson County, Kentucky. It's called real estate mobbing. It's property mobbing. And yes, if you're placed on any kind of a watch list, you are being human trafficked. Now let me continue on to the next piece of research here. This again, once again, is human trafficking, exploitation, and the abuse of older adults. Human trafficking of older adults can be simply defined as profiting from the exploitation of others through the use of force, fraud, and coercion. Human trafficking takes on a variety of forms and often intersects with domestic violence, sexual assault, and other forms of abuse in multiple ways. And I'm going to add real estate property mobbing. It was called blockbusting in the 1960s, and it was outlawed under the Civil Rights Act. But criminal networks like here in Jackson County, Kentucky, through secret societies and secret little handshakes behind your back, they will form their own little human trafficking group. So it's important to recognize that human trafficking and other types of victimization do not occur in little silos. There's a marked overlapping of patterns of the behaviors of the abusers and the traffickers. And make no mistake, there are delineations of the abusers and the traffickers. I'll go into that also. On what they use to exert power and control over a victim. Like going behind my back to my real estate agents, threatening them, bribing them to not sell my property. Having neighbors attack workers on my property to tell them, if you continue to clean her property, you're going to be part of our lawsuit, according to the jerky perky down the block. You know, the big mouth on Neighborhood Wars on A&E, April 11, 2023, posting no trespassing signs on my property. And what about the fact that the no trespassing sign that I had there were 4 bullet holes, and the bullet casings were on the ground, and the former sheriff, Paul Hayes, refused to investigate. That is a form of exerting power and control over a victim who's been victimized by abusers and the traffickers. Then, of course, is the intimate partner violence later in life. Physical, financial, sexual, emotional abuse of the individual 60 and older by a current or former intimate partner, spouse, or family member. Older adults experience various types of domestic abuse. However, the impact can be compounded by implicit and explicit biases that society still have about older adults. Actual or perceived mental health issues. And I'm going to tell you that my 83-year-old mom, and even my daughter wrote part of the obituary, that I'm sure that her coworkers reading this obituary will be shocked to know that my mother was 83 and not 63, which is what she looked like. Because that's the way the women naturally age in our family. These biases leave older adults more vulnerable for compound abuse and trafficking by exploitation. Across all age groups, survivors of sexual exploitation, harassment, abuse, and assault experience a range of emotional, psychological, physical, and spiritual reactions. And when I say assault experience, I'm going to add any type of assault. Pulsed microwave radiation, plasma assault, poisons, fake snow spread on your property. How about those unusual patterns only over my property? And thank you, subscriber. I so appreciate that. Yes, that image, when I have some time, that's going to be reported to all the facilities that investigate those things, because we are going to find the origin of that plane that decided on December 6, 2025 to go back and forth on my property, spreading poisons to brown out all the grass on the property. Yeah, we're going to find out who that person is. Older adults in particular are at risk of genital trauma, physical injury from sexual abuse, assaults. Now, I'm going to add, because it's not listed here, that your directed energy weapons can be used to pinpoint any portion of your body, your genitals, your urethra, your anus, your back, your sciatic nerve, your foot, your toes, your fingers. They can cut, they can bruise, they can slice, they can burn your skin and vibrate. This is a form. This is not excused by the military performing their little experiments across the country. No, we're not consenting to your military grade experiments. Some of these are happening in rural communities and across the country that have no direct ties to the military. And some of these impacts may include increased feelings of shame, anxiety, depression, sleep disturbances, changes in appetite, social withdrawal, substance use and abuse, sexually transmitted infections, suicidality, or exacerbation of existing medical conditions. Remember, we all have different compositions. And many times you may have a predisposition to something that maybe happens in your family, but it may never manifest in your lifetime because you take care of your body, you exercise, you eat healthfully, you don't do drugs, so you can go your entire life and that perhaps predisposition will never manifest in your life. However, if you have a human trafficking network, the Fusion Center, human traffickers, directing the joystick trafficking users, they can instigate through energy weapons any pre-existing condition that has never manifested in your life into your body. This is a form of sexual exploitation. This is an assault. The terms abuse and exploitation and trafficking are often used interchangeably when referring to victimization against older adults, but they may mean different things depending upon the situation, and they have different legal definitions, and obviously the legal definitions change per state. Understanding the intersection between domestic violence, sexual assault, and trafficking is extremely important for raising awareness of the realities of what survivors and victims face, especially when it's compounded by the unique needs experienced by those over the age of 60. And actually, we need to educate law enforcement about pulling over people that are 60 and over. Because what I'm watching on YouTube is making my stomach turn. So now this is what they do. This is how they go about abusing and exploit older folks. And this could be younger people too. The benefits trafficking is withholding your food stamps, withholding Social Security benefits, Medicaid, veterans benefits, in exchange for sex, drugs, money, or as a form of coercion. Or the way they steal my American Express bill and don't send it to me until maybe the day it's due. Profiting from the sale of explicit pictures without your consent. That would be like live streaming what's happening to you. Pay for play. Pokemon Go. Forcing an older adult to provide child care without payment, or not providing the appropriate living conditions or food. Threatening an older adult's independence if they don't comply with demands for, let's say, sexual activity or other things. They tend to focus on sexual activity and work. But it's way, way more than sexual abuse. They financially exploit older people by abusing the power of attorney or guardianship rights. They will misuse older adults' money and assets. They sometimes sexually exploit older adults in exchange for drugs, money, or something else of value. So why do they target older adults? Well, they do it to ageism and bias. Older people are often perceived as having less agency and bodily autonomy. My mother at age 83 was still working at a law firm. That's right, she was still working. She was gainfully employed and perfectly healthy. They're placed at greater risk for exploitation and abuse because they're more likely to rely on closed systems for support. They're a higher risk for injury. And just the way women who are sexually abused, older adults may be less likely to report these instances. They may be fearful to report these abuses. So, real human trafficking operation, it's organized exploitation for profit. Organized exploitation for profit. It's not random. It requires control, concealment, and money flow. So what does a trafficking team typically look like? I'm going to say fusion center operatives. The common roles are one person may fulfill multiple roles. There's the recruiter. The recruiter gains trust and may pose as a romantic partner, an employer, a friend, a mentor. They may pose as a fake police officer with a plastic badge. They may pose as a FBI agent. The recruiter will target vulnerabilities of individuals by causing financial stress, isolation, homelessness, and immigration issues. Then there is the controller, the exploiter. So you've first got the recruiter. The controller exploiter exerts dominance and control and uses threats. These could be your secret societies. They could be your county government. They use threats, debt manipulation, emotional coercion, and isolation. It often keeps the victim dependent on the system. Then you've got the facilitator or the transporter. This person moves the victims between locations, arranges housing or prevents housing, prevents you from selling your property, keeps you where you are as a coercive control mechanism, all the while devaluing your property by vandalizing it and then claiming that you're paranoid, right? They rearrange your schedules, and they can do this by using their energy weapons to manipulate your time. It's sort of like how they change the time on the small watch that I have. They made it an hour later, an hour earlier than it actually was. How do they do that? They break into your house. They know where everything is. These are human traffickers. They're exerting dominance, control, and fear. Anyone coming into your house knew exactly where my Swatch watch was. This is surveillance, monitoring. So these facilitators, transporters, they move victims between locations, prevent them from obtaining housing, guide them to particular housing so they can continue to manipulate, control, and coerce them. They may come into your life. They may appear as like a little helper or a manager. And then, of course, who do you have? You've got the financial handler. You know, like little Bobby Edwards at the Jackson County PVA that increases your property taxes by almost $1,500 as a senior citizen with no notification, no justification. They collect the money, like the sheriff's department collects the money. They launder funds. And they use it for cash, prepaid cards, like have to pay your neighbor the little gift cards. shell accounts, third-party payment apps. And then you've got number 5, you've got the enablers, whether they knowingly participate or unknowingly participate. These could be drivers, fake employers, workers on your property, document forgers, attorneys, county officials. How about those lawn guys? Motel owners, document forgers, online advertisers even. Most rings are not large conspiracies. They survive by staying small and hidden because you know what? Here in Jackson County, Kentucky, they don't want to spread the money around too far because they're greedy. They want it all for themselves. So how does human trafficking actually operate? Well, I'm going to make an argument that it operates through creating something called a terrorist watch list and loading it with millions of innocent people who have never committed a crime in their lives, but instead call those people domestic terrorists. And then once you're on the list, you're blacklisted. Your names are sold to various entities, secret societies, private security firms. What else? I just went blank. Universities, research scientists, and for covert experimentation, like here in Jackson County, Kentucky. Yeah, they stuck the Pikeville Medical Center on my network when I moved here. Yes, and they specialized in vascular issues, which I didn't have. They don't have. But they did perform a covert surgical procedure on my knee. And they left 4 surgical scars behind. And they continue to vibrate that leg here in Jackson County, Kentucky, through the Pikeville Medical Center. The key reality is that it's profit-driven. The victims are kept invisible because they spread slander and defamation and lies about the individual. They even do it online with cyberstalkers. Their operations avoid attention, not attract it. So people like the magistrate, the little, what's his name, Toddler? I call him Toddler. Danny Toddler. Danny Toddler. He's got to be a little toddler to harass a woman. What kind of a little weenie toddler harasses a woman? Hides in the shadows. No email address, no phone number, no Facebook page, no way of contacting little Danny Toddler. But behind my back, he tells the road crew to perform damage on my property, even though the road crew knows better than to do what they did. They did what they did and destroyed it. And that was little Danny Toddler harassing a senior citizen woman while hiding in the shadows. I wonder if he belongs to one of those secret society groups we all know about. So some of their common methods is to falsify job offers. They try to send in the honey pot, the honey traps, romantic manipulation, boyfriend and girlfriend. Debt bondage. Debt bondage is a form of real estate property mobbing. Because when they're destroying your property, you need to perform some repairs. Some repairs are absolutely necessary. So you're forced to pay for something sometimes 2 and 3 times when the lifespan of that object may be 15 years. They confiscate your ID, like stealing my master's degree, stealing my ministry ordination. my Reiki Master Teacher certification, my passport, my New Jersey license plates, my checkbook registry. They confiscate your ID. They put you in debt bondage by increasing your property taxes when you should have zero. Threats involving family, housing, or immigration. Constant monitoring through people. Well, I know for a fact that the poopy nurse and her entire poopy family, the sheriff's department, the little creepo that hangs out on the county road all night long, and one that I caught this morning, 7:23 a.m. and 7:30 a.m. 7:23, 7:30 a.m. The constant monitoring through other people. Now, what trafficking doesn't look like? It doesn't have to do with bitchcraft. I'm going to say witchcraft. That's not human trafficking. Those are forms of ritual abuse. They may be employed by the traffickers. They may be employed by the traffickers. Some of the real red flags of victims are they're not free to leave their form of employment or housing. They won't let me sell my property while they're vandalizing it. They're blocking people from contacting me. I am being trafficked in Jackson County, Kentucky, by a network of neighbors, local government, for-profit, sheriff, county lawyer, magistrate, fusion center operatives, fusion center traffickers, multiple other groups. Another red flag of a victim is they are exhausted. They may be malnourished. They may have untreated injuries. And of course, victims rarely self-identify as victims while they're trapped in their situation. So how are these traffickers caught? They're generally not exposed by private citizens. They're only caught through victim disclosure, through their financial crimes, like stealing tax money, coercing real estate agents, cash flow anomalies. Well, guess what? Men and women, boys and girls, the entire state of Kentucky can't pass a damn audit. And right here in Jackson County, Kentucky, we are not passing audits here either. Their financial crimes is money laundering, tax evasion, cash flow anomalies. And what do? How do they do this to you and I? Oh, watch the YouTube creators, the cop auditors. Routine policing, traffic stops, pulling you over for nothing, labor inspections, immigration checks. Well, I don't know if you've been watching the news about what's going on with ICE. ICE is not nice. Online advertising investigations, placing an ad, fake job listings, escort platforms. This is how you catch these traffickers. Whistleblowers. You'll have whistleblowers come forward, social workers, employees, medical professionals. Or how about the whistleblowers that come forward on my channel and leave me comments like, there's a man using a battery operated directed energy weapon on your hill. I'm just going to have to find out which hill that is. Maybe it's the county road hill. A man with a battery operated directed energy weapon pointed at me. So we need to educate the public about what human trafficking is and isn't. Harassment can equal trafficking. Secret networks can be involved in trafficking. The terrorist watch list is a form of human trafficking. So now, according to the 2025 Trafficking in Persons report by the State Department, and we all know that these numbers are definitely off. They're definitely off. Trafficking in persons and human trafficking are umbrella terms used interchangeably. They refer to a crime whereby traffickers exploit and profit at the expense of adults or children by compelling them to perform labor or engage in commercial sex. I'm going to add that understanding human trafficking needs to encompass broader areas. And as I recognized in the trafficking of elders since 2024 has increased exponentially. And it is a highly unresearched area of human trafficking. Medicare, Medicaid, life insurance policies. I'm going to add real estate, property. Okay? So the United States does recognize only two forms of trafficking: sex and forced labor. We need to change the vocabulary, the definition of human trafficking, because it doesn't only involve exploitation for sex or labor. It involves theft, property mobbing, property taxes, coercion, life insurance policies, fake deeds, falsifying deeds, coercing a land surveyor to add something that didn't exist. It can involve all of those things. That is a form of human trafficking. And the real human traffickers that come into your communities are the Fusion Center human trafficking operators. Okay? So anyway, I look forward to your questions and comments down below. I'm sure this will prove to be a very lively conversation. And this is for educational purposes only. I am merely reading statistics by the Department of State. And I can post I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to post that link. But I'm also reading a peer-reviewed article. And I'm reading Human Trafficking of Older Adults PDF by the Pennsylvania Coalition Against Domestic Violence. So these are all published articles, peer-reviewed articles, and federal and state statistics. This is Lorraine Alternative Homesteading, signing off for now.